Hello, and you are listening to Eco Justice Radio. We present environmental and climate stories from a social justice frame, featuring voices not necessarily heard on mainstream media. Welcome, I'm Jack Ite. On today's show, Replant the Forest Festival, merging art, music, and restoration. Host Carrie Kim will be interviewing Brock Pollock, founder and executive director of Replant the Forest Festival, and Christopher Breedlove, director of global activation at Burning Man Project and a board member for the Replant the Forest Festival. Brock Pollock founded that Replant the Forest Festival, a nonprofit organization dedicated to ecological restoration through the power of community and music, a seasoned professional musician with a strong commitment to environmental healing. Brock merges his dual passions by pioneering a new kind of event, environmental restoration music festivals. Christopher Breedlove works at the intersection of community, creativity, and regenerative culture and is passionate about helping people design the future they want to live in.
Aloha, this is Carrie Kim. Today, listeners, we have Brock Pollock and Christopher Breedlove of the nonprofit org Replant the Forest Festival joining us today to talk about the potency of weaving together art, music, community, reforestation, and ecosystem restoration. We thank the Tongva ancestors for their enduring legacy, presence, and stewardship of this region. Our show comes to you from the ancestral homelands of the Tongva and all of their relatives. And we invite you to support the original tribal nations, their homelands and lifeways wherever you now live, and to act on their behalf, to act for their continuance. Our times call for actions, especially for the native peoples of this and every continent. Welcome, Brock and Christopher. Mahalo for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having us. We're honored to be here.
Happy to be here with you.
You know, our sustenance and that of all life on this planet depends upon the thriving of forests. We should be alarmed and concerned that despite what we know about the urgent need to protect forests globally, the world's forests continue to be destroyed by deforestation, conventional agriculture, logging, and wildfires, as well as urban fires, as we recently experienced here in LA. According to the Forest Declaration Assessment of 2024, 15.7 million acres of forest were lost in 2023, which is roughly equivalent to the country of Ireland. In 2024, 44.2 million acres of Brazil's Amazon rainforest burned, and in 2023, the world lost 9.1 million acres of primary tropical forest. Even as certain gains are made in protecting forests, we are far behind the threshold needed to halt global deforestation. These statistics may seem abstract, but serve as reminders that the time to act on behalf of Mother Earth is now. Great diligence and effort is required of all of us. Responsibility for the earth, preserving and restoring the world's forests and ecosystems is up to us. It can't be deferred or passed on to someone else. Enter Replant the Forest Festival. Replant the Forest Festival was born of a wish to engage like-hearted community in the healing of Earth by combining art, music, community, and the replanting of trees for ecosystem restoration. By joining in Replant the Forest Festival's efforts to restore degraded lands, plant trees in underserved communities, and educate the public about the value of ecosystems and regenerative practices, we can aspire to leave a legacy of care, thriving, and abundance for future generations of all life. So, you two, let's start at the beginning. How and why did Replant the Forest begin? What is the gestation of this org?
Yeah, I'll jump in. This is Brock. Carrie, thank you so much for that absolutely beautiful intro and for starting it with those really hard-hitting statistics also.
Mm-hmm.
I usually start my story when I was 18, but when you were speaking, I actually got thrown back to probably being around 8 years old. I went to a science museum in Ohio where I grew up. And I remember they had this cool box you could look into, which was a forest in the Amazon. And
Mm-hmm.
then this music, would happen, these sounds of
Mm-hmm.
and cutting, and the trees would dissolve, and it would show that it was
Wow.
clear cut. It's
Wow.
a really early memory in
Wow.
my mind of like, oh, A, there's forests that are all over the world that are huge, and B, they're being cut down.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a story that's been told to me every year of my life
Wow.
about
Yeah.
the forests being cut down.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I grew up in Akron, Ohio, and had a childhood and a life where I played in the woods a lot and spent a lot of time with the trees, a lot of times outside.
Mm-hmm.
I also come from a really supportive family that loves music, and so I started going to music festivals around 16 years old. I was going to camping music festivals and
Mm-hmm.
experiencing the magic that happens when people gather for music.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, when I was 18, I went to a really, really large festival in Tennessee that was an 80,000 person festival
Uh-huh.
and had really incredible time, experienced so much amazing music and connection with people and feeling the open-mindedness, the open-heartedness, and the power of a mass gathering.
Mm-hmm.
And when it came time to leave, I looked over my shoulder to kind of wish well onto this magical place that had lifted me up and saw that it was just covered in garbage
Mm-hmm.
and broken tents and kind of
Uh-huh.
meandering folks. And it was really something that did not feel good.
You mean the post-festival aftermath? Is that what
I
you
mean, the
were?
post-festival aftermath, yeah, that after-festival destruction
Mm-hmm.
that basically is the wake of this connective high that we were on with the music.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came home, I had the thought, well, what if we went to degraded lands and instead of leaving the land trashed when we're done, we use that people power to plant a forest and to leave behind the land better than we found it.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be called Replant the Forest Festival. And that's where the name came down. And I tucked it into a pocket in my heart and went on to pursue being a musician, living in Los Angeles. And, during the COVID-19 pandemic is when the space was created for me to make it a nonprofit organization.
Mm-hmm. So it actually began did it actually begin in 2022?
We incorporated in 21 and we started hosting events in 22.
Mm-hmm.
And we've hosted probably a couple dozen events at this point and
Mm-hmm.
planted over 6,200 trees as of this time
Wow.
in early 2025. Yeah, so
That's
that's
amazing. Yeah, the number of trees. I wanted to ask you, Christopher, you've been long involved with Burning Man as director of global activation, and I was wondering how you came to be on the board of Replant the Forest Festival.
Yeah, thank you. And to start back a little bit further, but not go too far into it, I also grew up, really spending time in nature. That was a huge thing with my dad. We'd go camping, we'd go backpacking, and so that was a big love for me. And so, most of my life I've been involved in school and earth clubs or things like that. And much like Brock, when I was in my teenage years, I also got involved in music festivals, and for me, it actually started at Bonnaroo. I'm wondering if that was the one for you when you said Tennessee, Brock.
Ah,
yeah, it was
Yeah,
Bonnaroo.
yeah, it was Bonnaroo, and I joined the
Bonnaroo.
green team back in
mm,
the day there, and for me, it kind of launched into a variety of things, which I was involved with the Rothbury Music Festival. I think that was 2009 or 10, which at
mhm,
that time was trying to be the most sustainable festival in the
mm,
world.
mhm, mhm,
Electric Forest, and then I ended up working with Burning Man, starting maybe around also 2009. And
mhm,
my career there has really kind of moved into what does Burning Man culture mean out in the world? And so
mhm,
how are we helping people create participatory, collaborative, and creative resilient systems out in the world? And so that's how I kind of actually ended up being connected with Brock. I think that the universe tried to bring us together through a mutual
mhm,
friend several years before we actually met. but then
Hmm.
it was at one of the very first events that Replant the Forest was doing in Topanga, California, which is where I live. A friend
Right.
named Scott Weinberg
Hmm.
connected us together, and I heard about what Brock was trying to do with the
Hmm.
organization, and I was like, I would love to try and bring in some participatory creativity into this, like let's see what the community might want to bring in. And so that's kind of how I got collided with Brock. And
Hmm.
him and I now have been playing together for about 2 years. And,
Hmm.
I think we're both really excited that this big event, the first multi-day event that's coming up here is going to be really, I think, a new foundation of what Brock's dream has been.
And why is it a new foundation at this point? Why is this a new foundation?
Yeah,
Bigger
yeah.
event, or what is it, a larger scale, or what is?
The deep vision is we should have multi-day camping, culture, music festivals that are also ecosystem restoration mass events.
Hmm.
And the way it's been manifesting in the organization over the past 3 years of our impact action has been doing day tree planting concerts throughout the Santa Monica Mountain Range,
Uh-huh.
as well as other events that are connecting us to the ecosystem of environmental organizations in LA.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the reason why this is such a kind of like a mountain plateau moment for us
Mm.
is we're going to be having, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 2 nights of camping, 3 full day event, and it's going to be framed with a big pollinator and tree habitat planting that happens on
Hmm.
Saturday morning.
Uh-huh.
And it's really the full vision. People are camping, people are planting. We've got incredible environmental workshops happening on topics like compost and biochar and um, mycoremediation and a lot of fun things. But there's also qigong and yoga, and then there's DJs and live musicians and
Hmm.
food and community. So it's really an elevation and uh, the blueprint that we want to expand from.
And that what is April 25th to the 27th, right? That's the end of this month.
Yeah, April 25th through the 27th, and it's going to be in Santa Paula, California.
And so, well, we will give all the information to listeners so they can find out more about it. But it's pretty incredible what's happening. It's amazing to hear that in just a short time you've already planted 6,200 trees. We had David Millarch of the Archangel Ancient Tree Archive, who's doing a lot around restoring the ancient, great like redwoods and different of the huge species of trees. And he had said that really every single human being, just for the gift of our life and the gift of our breath, should plant 3 trees in our lifetime. So I think you guys have already well exceeded that. So thank you for that. But
It took a community. It took many hands.
sure, many hands light work, right? But I wonder when you two hear statistics like that, and it is important to remember the stats, even though they are abstract. You're not necessarily seeing it right in front of our face, but we do know it's happening globally. How do you two remain undaunted? Like, what keeps you motivated and engaged? We know it's kind of like that hummingbird dropping a drop of water in the forest, but we have to keep doing it. What motivates you two to just keep going in the face of these kinds of odds and stats?
It's a really good question. There's a lot happening in the world, and there's particularly a lot happening in the world right now. And I think for me, I have to really root down and think about where does my inspiration come from. And one of those inspirations for me is a term coined by Kevin Kelly, which is the idea of protopia. It's not a utopian vision, which is a perfect world, which we know we can't achieve. And it's definitely not the dystopian hellscape in which none of us get out alive. It's protopia, which is a tomorrow that's a little bit better than yesterday, made real through our collective actions. And
Mhm.
to me, it really is around doing those small things. When you were saying the 3 trees, I also always think about that quote, right? The best time to plant a tree was 40 years ago, and the second best
Mhm.
time is now. And
Mhm.
so if we're really going to dream into the future and think about, our children and our children's children, I think that's who we're planting these trees for. Uh,
Mhm.
it might be a little rough for us in the next coming decades, but I want to be thinking even longer term in that seven generation sense and
Mm-hmm.
be doing actions today that I know will have some benefit for people who I will never know their names. And to me,
Right.
that's where I find that hope.
Mm-hmm. So, Brock, for you, what keeps you engaged and motivated in the direction of your dreams?
Yeah, for me, I dedicated my life to art for a long time, where, making music and making art was the core purpose of my existence. And it was
Mm-hmm.
really, really rich. And I was having a tremendous psycho-spiritual impact on the world, which I still do as an artist, musician, and a teacher. And that feels really good. But I hit this point where I felt, God, I need to have a positive impact physically in the world. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, especially in an age where social media has capitalized on so much space inside our minds, inside of our time frame of a day, it
Mm-hmm.
kind of is an illusion where it's like, how many petitions could you sign that
Mm-hmm.
are going to really make a difference and empower you versus going out and spending a morning planting trees?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think for me, it's just that the choice is despair or empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not here for the despair. That's not why I believe I was brought into the world,
Right.
and it's definitely something that's haunted me before, but I've decided that I'm ready to do battle with the despair by
Mm-hmm.
taking action and uplifting myself. And I think that in particularly the idea of ecosystem restoration festivals
Mm-hmm.
and these type of art spaces that intersect action are really important because we celebrate and we have fun while we're doing this good work. And I think that that's a marriage that is going to be able to uplift us for a long time.
Well, I think it's very important, especially in this era of social media and things becoming more and more in a 2D realm, in a virtual realm, that, especially even since the pandemic, just how important it is to be relating with people face to face, how important it is to have visceral connection to the earth. And that is, cannot be underestimated, the value of that for our psyche, for our souls, and for our connections to each other. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is essential. I wondered if you could share some of the significant impacts that some of your projects have had or that you would like to share with listeners, because as you said, it's 6,200 trees. That's a lot of trees. And maybe you could share some of those stories. And we're going to take a break in a minute, but we'll start with some and maybe continue with more.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll start with one of our first really large impact projects. We
Mm-hmm.
have had a tremendous partnership with the Santa Monica Mountains Fund, SAMO Fund. They're a really incredible organization that leads restoration projects across federal lands in the Santa Monica Range.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the ones who helped facilitate the planning project that we came on and collaborated them with on the project with them.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a big creek restoration at Cheseboro Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
Cheseboro Canyon is how it's spelled on the sign when you're on the
Right.
101
Yeah.
highway.
Yeah.
And the Woolsey fire came through and absolutely destroyed all the willow stands and left these, bare creeks.
Mm-hmm.
We did these huge mass willow plantings that, we were able to put up really, really large numbers that day. And I remember I came back like 10 months later and they were already like 13 feet in the air.
Wow. Are you kidding me? That's amazing.
And it was really, really beautiful. And we learned that, the willow tree is such a support tree for the ecosystem, from the
Mhm.
water to the insects to the birds. And the way that people light up when they get to take part in these type of projects, that
Sure.
it's not just a concert or a party or
Mm.
a volunteer event, but a little bit of everything has been a real highlight.
Yeah, well, definitely, but especially to see that, after they've grown in and a bit, to see that that could happen, that could really transform the entire landscape and what the value of that is. So, does the Samo Fund then take care of the trees, kind of monitoring them and taking care of them and the post festival? Like, how does the care go with the trees after
Yeah, absolutely. So
they go home?
for that particular project, yes, for the projects that we've teamed up with them, that's
Hmm.
something that's been really helpful for us as a young organization. we don't have the capacity that Sanmo Fund, that's a really, multi-decade, well-established and
Mhm.
funded organization has to
Mm.
continue care. So that's
Right.
part of the sweet partnership is that, they're really helping us with the long-term care and making sure that we're doing it right because we're all, growing it up together.
Well, are you always trying to partner with folks that so that that long-term care is addressed? Like obviously you probably build that in when you hold an event that you already know how that's going to be handled. It's already been planned for.
Yeah, anytime that we do an event, the events are, and it's a longer conversation for us to get into here, but it's really it's a twofold thing, right? There's the dynamic of hosting an ecosystem restoration project, and there's the dynamic of hosting an event. But
Mm.
we always want to make sure that our restoration projects are done properly, that we're planting the right plants in the right
Hmm.
area, and that we
Mm.
do have a long-term plan for them. And so sometimes that manifests with having great partnerships that help us lift it.
Hmm.
And in other times, we are doing it ourselves with private property owners.
Uh-huh.
And it's been a learning process, on the best way to do that.
So we are going to take a break right now, you two, and listeners. We will be back shortly with Brock Pollock and Christopher Breedlove of Replant the Forest Festival.
You are listening to Eco Justice Radio, a listener-supported media outlet. Please consider making a donation to ensure that we can continue to provide socially and environmentally driven content. Donations can be made at ecojusticeradio.org or socal350.org. For an extended version of this interview, as well as other benefits, we encourage you to become a member of our Patreon at patreon.com/ecojusticeradio. Today, you're listening to Replant the Forest Festival, merging art, music, and restoration with host Carrie Kim and guests Brock Pollock, founder and executive director of Replant the Forest Festival, and Christopher Breedlove, director of global activation at Burning Man Project and a board member for the Replant the Forest Festival.
Listeners, we are back with Brock Pollock and Christopher Breedlove from Replant the Forest Festival. And are there any other stories you'd like to tell? I mean, that's a fantastic one about the one where you were working with Samo Fund. I think you planted like 1,200 willows. Yes, it was quite a
Yeah,
number.
there was 1,200 on that one that was on one of them. We've done two big willow restorations. The first one we did 700, and then the second one we did 1,200, which feels really good and is really powerful, and just goes to show. Well, I mean, one of the most amazing things that I've seen
Mm-hmm.
is that I did a lot of planting with tree people myself prior to starting Replant the Forest
Okay.
Festival,
Uh-huh.
and of course, anyone in Southern California has heard their name. They're, one of the biggest tree planting organizations out there.
Sure. Sure.
And I really love getting to go out there and make it happen. And one thing that I noticed when you add music, it extends the desire to be planting, from people to people. So if you do an event where it's really a focused volunteer event, it's really
Right.
special, it's really amazing, and I love it. And one of the things that I guess I've just noticed is when we're able to pair live music and food and conversation, and we're creating shade, and there's a home base, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not really looking like a typical volunteer event.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be amazed at the people who want to just keep on going, and that's part of how we've been able to get large numbers over smaller events sometimes is because the people who are out there are fired up and they're having fun.
Mm-hmm. So was it originally the desire to have the 3-day festival, or was it just kind of an organically that came up because you needed that many days of hands on the land?
No, it's always wanted to be in a music festival weekend format.
Mhm.
I got to go to Burning Man and camp with Burners Without Borders with Christopher,
Yeah.
and that was the first time that I started to see these much longer festival dynamics at play.
Mhm.
Burning Man, and Christopher can speak to this, is a multi-week, if not multi-month, experience out there on the land, building and having it together.
Mhm.
Um, I think for us, we're not going to reforest the entire planet with our festivals. That's not the expectation of Replant the Forest Festival.
Mhm.
The goal is to turn people's minds on and their
Mhm.
hearts on, and
Mhm.
to say, "Oh wow, this is something that I can do. Like, you wouldn't believe how many people come to our events and say, this is the first time I've ever planted a tree. And they're so
Oh,
lit up and excited.
right.
And so, what we're creating, and the reason why the festival is important is because the festival is a platform for expression and for community and for
Hmm.
culture and for gathering.
Hmm.
And, most festivals across millennia need
Hmm.
a core theme. They need
Right.
something to underpin why we're gathering.
Sure.
And what we're using as our theme is ecosystem restoration.
Hmm.
So when people come together, that is the theme. That's what's bringing them in, and they get that upliftment. But it's not one dimensional because we want to make it deeper, as far as the experience goes, and people getting to connect. And I'd love, Christopher, you can jump in here and talking about, some of the connections there.
Yeah, well, I think, one of the ways that I personally describe what we're trying to do is that, it's a 3-day music festival where land restoration is our headliner. And
Hmm.
that's the reason we're coming together. That's
Right.
ideally the draw. And I think one of the things that Brock was kind of pointing to there is that we're going to be mixing audiences. Some people are going to be coming to our event because they're permaculture nerds, they're into the land, that's really why they want to be there. But other people are going to be coming to the event because of the music, because of the art, because of the experience. And so it's
Right.
going to be a commingling of
Hmm.
these cultures. And I think that that's a really important way to turn new people on to
Hmm.
ecosystem restoration, to get people to get their hands in the dirt, like again, Brock was saying, because
Mhm.
it that when you do have that music and you have that community, it can ignite something in you. And another thing that's really true for me, and actually one of the reasons I wanted to join the board, is that I really do believe if it's not fun, it's not sustainable. And
Uh-huh.
again,
Uh-huh.
there's so much we want to quote unquote fix in the world. If
Hmm.
we're not resourcing ourselves with
Yeah.
joy and with community and with
Hmm.
wonder, then we're going to burn out by doing this work. And so that's one of the things that I'm really excited about by doing the restoration in this way is that it's going to heal the land, but ideally it's going to heal ourselves as well by coming together with that wonder and that joy.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think anyone who's an activist that has gone into restoration work knows that feeling that you're talking about, Christopher, of the burnout, like you just can't keep going. It's exhausting. But when we keep replenishing ourselves by being in the reciprocation with Mother Earth, it's just naturally we derive the energy. It's an energetic cycle.
Yeah.
I was wondering, are you two, or is Replant the Forest Festival primarily working with degraded lands or lands affected by wildfires? Is that a deliberate thing? I know you're also working with more underserved communities that have no or little green canopy. How are the events coming to you? Are you just looking at places that are really void, or again, degraded places that need that? How are you figuring out where is the next event?
Yeah, it's twofold. One is that we do want to restore degraded land because there's no shortage of degraded land. So that's where the biggest impact is.
Hmm.
And like you were talking about, the energy of when you connect with the land connects with you. And I
Hmm.
think that we love going to really, really beautiful, intact ecosystems because they're stunning.
Hmm.
Um, but you could go to a degraded ecosystem and do work and come back in 15 years and it will be stunning also. And I
Sure.
think that story of how quick the turnaround can be is one that a lot of people don't know about. And that's
Hmm.
a part of what we're broadcasting. So
Hmm.
when we're looking at doing our restoration events, the answer is yes, we definitely are looking to go to degraded lands, whether that's through wildfire or other means.
Hmm.
Um, but we're also, a nonprofit in an urban area in Los Angeles.
Hmm.
And, we are interested in taking part in the goal of bringing more canopy into the city of Los Angeles.
Right.
In LA, there's a major lack of canopy in historically underserved neighborhoods.
Sure.
And it's been put on nonprofits in the city of Los Angeles to bring those trees there.
Hmm.
That's something that is the way that the dynamic has unfolded in the city of Los Angeles.
Hmm.
So, we're also looking to take part in urban planting events, and a lot of that has to do with the ability to grow as a nonprofit and have the funds to do the type of urban planting concerts, and a number of different really fun, creative ideas that we have that
Hmm.
we are, as we grow, looking to find the right support
Right.
from the community and from
Hmm.
funds and other people who have the ability to support to live
Hmm.
this mission of bringing art and, landscape restoration to the masses.
Well, we definitely do need more of the green canopy. Even as you speak, I think about the urban environment and even should care for the existing trees we have because driving around LA, I always find it kind of depressing to see that the trees just feel so neglected here. Don't you guys feel that you just feel like, oh, they're barely surviving a lot of the times. Like they're just they're playing their role, but I feel like we're not reciprocating to these trees. For many people, I feel like they're like an afterthought, if even an afterthought.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I wish that would also be something. Christopher, I don't know if you might talk about your free tree adoption concerts. I don't know if that's something that you still are doing a lot of or.
Brock, do you want to answer that? I also could answer something about the land if you wanted to
Yeah.
on
Oh, go
there.
ahead, Christopher. Why don't you go ahead and then we'll have Brock talk about the tree adoption.
Yeah, because I was going to just add one thing on the land, and especially with where we're going to be here in Santa Paula, is that property itself had actually been affected by a wildfire just this past fall. And so
Mhm.
Brock made a really good connection there. And that was before the fires even happened in Los Angeles. And so
Mhm.
one of the things that I'm feeling excited about with this event that we have coming up is that it's already kind of going to start to be a model, ideally, for how we can bring communities together. Because
Mhm.
as now we know, Los Angeles has a lot of devastated land from these past fires. And so we're going to be practicing what it means to bring community together to do that land restoration work after a wildfire. And I think
Mhm.
that's really one of the great things that Brock kind of set up, I think, without even knowing it
Right.
earlier this year, is that ideally we want this to be a prototype for how community can come together around land restoration in post-fire situations.
Have you
Yeah.
guys already been in conversations with people? Yeah, I mean, I know maybe it's a little bit early with the remediation efforts that are still needed for the toxicity in the soil. I mean, what have you guys already planted seeds for things here locally?
Yeah, I mean it's we're looking to successfully see through our project in Santa Paula first. And like Christopher said, we actually had made the relationship there and felt like it was an amazing space. And that was before they had a fire, and for one reason or another, it didn't happen. And then the fire hit, the mountain fire of 2024.
Hmm.
And so, in December, we're like, okay, well, next year is about wildfire resilience, wildfire restoration. We're going to
Hmm.
be learning it. This is a great space for us to learn,
Hmm.
demo. And then, yeah, with the Eaton and Palisades fires, and everything, it just made it that much more amplified that this is incredibly important work for us to learn. And, speaking about what you were saying about the trees in the city, we live in a semi-arid Mediterranean climate in Southern California,
Hmm.
and water has historically been an issue, and where water gets allocated is a big part of the tree
Hmm.
story. And so there's a lot of things for us to consider as a city community on and how to help our nature help us,
Hmm. Hmm.
The healthier the trees are, the cooler it is outside, different things like that. And we would love to expand our work in Los Angeles and continue to do more events, day events or camping events. And that's something that, I think there needs to be a little bit more time between,
Hmm.
the big fires just happened and
Right, sure.
they're at such a scale that, I think we would love to, next year look into what that looks like, especially being able to showcase what we've done so far and
Right.
hopefully, find the right partners.
Are you documenting the efforts? I mean, are you documenting over time? Like, for example, the willow stands that you planted at the one event in the Cheseboro Canyon. Are you doing things like that to track it over time to see how the trees fare and as an example for people to see how much the landscape changes?
Yeah, we've been
And
doing photography.
biodiversity counts, things like that.
I'm sure we could do better. And if someone hears this and they have some ideas for us, we're more than welcome to take on more ideas because we're also learning all the time. Mainly with those, we've just been using photography and visiting the spaces. And
Hmm.
then with this, really degraded land that we have found and that we're working with in Santa Paula, we have a whole video team, and we're, making a piece about the festival and plan on continuing to revisit that as an example in the ecosystem restoration communities.
Maybe you can partner with the Audubon Society that they can do.
We have before, actually,
Stories like that for the
Audubon Society.
biodiversity to just see what kind of, increase in like birds and just other wildlife that come back, But
Yeah, that's a
uh,
great call. There's a lot of just great, organizations in Southern California, Audubon Society, Theodore Payne, City Plants, these are some of the folks we've been able to work with. And one of the things that's so inspiring about being in Los Angeles is that there's just a lot of really passionate people who really love the land and
mhm,
have a lot to offer. And we live in a city that's got so much, wilderness urban interface that it's
right.
it's a really kind of unique space for us to all to coexist in.
Mhm. Well, and I think everybody, I mean, if you live here, you feel the change. If you've lived here for any length of time, you feel the change of how much biodiversity, like you say, the green canopy, the trees that have been eliminated through building, through fire, all of the different ways that we have seen fewer and fewer trees. You can feel it here. You can feel the less oxygen. I mean, we need to all be planting trees, as we know. So, Brock, I was wondering if you could speak at all about your actual background in ecosystem restoration work, because I know that you've studied it. I'm just wondering what was your background in that? We know kind of how you grew up from you sharing the story, but as an
Yeah.
adult and or when you got engaged in this.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like I shared, my background is really in music. That
Right.
that's really where I did all my time and learning and life experience. And of course, I've always been a huge nature fan, love getting out in nature. And it was, really, I guess, probably in 2019, I started taking planting trees way more seriously. And like I said, I started with Tree People.
Right.
They have such tremendous projects that they do,
Hmm.
and just feeling like, wow, this is really for me. I love learning about ecosystem restoration with them. And I think what really spurred it, maybe even more than them, is actually the work of John Liu. I
Mm.
was on YouTube watching, just watching nature stuff, watching
Oh,
land things,
yeah. And
exploring
he
the land
popped
of
up.
YouTube.
Yeah.
And John Liu popped up, and he has a piece on YouTube called I think it's called The Restoration of the Lus Plateau. It's about the Lus Plateau in China, which is the cradle of Chinese civilization. It was heavily degraded over, I guess, like 5,000 years of agriculture. And in 1990, he was a cameraman for PBS and was able to document it being completely transformed
Hmm.
through their process.
Hmm.
And there's this image of it going from just a desertified land to this thriving green landscape. And that was really it for me. So that's what turned me on. And I just started learning online and working with organizations like Tree People and exploring what it was all about. And it just continued to roll and blossom. And then I had the opportunity to meet John actually, because he was here in Southern
Hmm.
California, and had the opportunity to be, Oshri Hakak is a co-founder at Replant the Forest Festival. He's one of the fellows
Yes.
in it. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, we got to be part of the Liu crew for a Lightning in the Bottle festival. Lightning in the
Oh, yeah,
Bottle.
yeah. I
And
forgot about
yeah,
that
John
one.
was speaking there. So we got to
Uh-huh.
go to a festival with John. And, that's kind of it. I'm definitely not an expert. I'm learning too. And
Right.
I think that that's something that we really welcome in our community. We have tremendous experts at the festival. We've got a bunch
Right.
of unreal people coming and teaching.
Hmm.
But this isn't a space for someone who's super learned, and it's just about having environmental science majors and
Right.
families with a strong volunteer culture. It's for everybody,
Right.
and we're learning it together and we're having fun doing it.
Well, I think the thing is, you don't want people to feel intimidated also by the knowledge. They want to feel like they can participate as equally as anybody else. But I think when you get people touching the earth together, there's something that just happens organically, that there's just an easier flow of things. They're just sort of, we remember what this is.
Mm-hmm.
And in our DNA, somewhere we remember how to interact when we're touching the soil together. So, Brock, we are going to take another break right here and be back with you and Christopher in just a moment.
You are listening to Eco Justice Radio, a listener-supported media outlet. Please consider making a donation to ensure that we can continue to provide socially and environmentally driven content. Donations can be made at ecojusticeradio.org or socal350.org. For an extended version of this interview, as well as other benefits, we encourage you to become a member of our Patreon at patreon.com/EcoJusticeRadio. Today you're listening to Replant the Forest Festival, merging art, music, and restoration with host Carrie Kim and guests Brock Pollock, founder and executive director of Replant the Forest Festival, and Christopher Breedlove, director of global activation at Burning Man Project and a board member for the Replant the Forest Festival.
Christopher, were you impacted by the fires yourself in Topanga?
I mean, definitely the fires got about a 4-minute walk, 5-minute walk from my house. And thankfully my house is still here, but
You were evacuated?
yeah, I evacuated, I stayed, and actually, I mean, Brock and
Yeah.
I were doing
The whole
the
story.
first production meeting for this coming event when the evacuation order kind of showed up. And so I actually was like, Brock, I gotta run. I jumped off, and then yeah, it was a crazy month after that. So
Christopher, I'm just wondering if how that increased the urgency of these projects, of these replanting the forest festivals for you, having to, undergo that yourself.
yeah, it's a great question. And part of the work that I've been doing over the last 10 years personally has been really in helping creative communities figure out how to become more civically engaged. And so that really started. Brock had said the word earlier. One of the programs I run for Burning Man Project is called Burns Without Borders. And we actually have our foundational genesis story in Hurricane Katrina. And so doing this work with communities and in a lot of disaster situations over the last decade, and then also kind of working in refugee contexts as well, one thing that I kept coming back to was that it was the environment as a source problem that was making it so that we were having mass migration, so that we were having these different disasters.
Right.
And so to me, this ecosystem restoration work is very deeply needed because personally, I and my community we got tired of running out to all of these different disasters and trying to rebuild systems that inevitably were going to fail again. And so that's why for me, even kind of coming from this world of disaster relief, this type of work with land restoration, this is the longer term solution that I want to be involved in now, because again, I would like the next generation and the generation after me to be in a more stable climate future.
Sure. Instead of doing like band-aid after band-aid, exactly as you say. And the same thing with fires, with wildfires. When we know that we need to restore the hydrological cycle here. We know we need to have more tree canopy. We know we need to, we could store more moisture in the soil. So there's that, it is imperative for this learning to occur and to keep spreading that out so that more and more people are doing that very thing, even just in our little hyper locally to globally. So.
Yeah, nature-based solutions are the ones that have been tested by, millions of years of time. We know that these systems, they work. They've been working together, and restoring those functional systems is our best bet forward.
Also, I wanted to throw another question at your way, Christopher, is you've mentioned that you work at the intersection of community, creativity, and regenerative culture. And I'm wondering if you could define regenerative culture and also what you feel makes a culture regenerative itself.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's an exploration that I'm still in. But for me, that word regenerative, as it becomes more of a buzzword these days, and I feel like is being applied to everything, what's really been kind of the source for me around that is that when I'm looking around, I don't want to be looking for what the problems are.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be looking for what the potential is. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a really easy way to describe that is with Los Angeles. We knew that flooding and rainfall was a quote unquote problem. And so we built a solution to that problem, which is these big cement chutes that throw all the water right back out into the ocean. And we've now solved that problem.
Mm-hmm.
But we lost what the potential of all of that rainwater was. And
Right.
so we lose all of that water that falls on our city every single
Mhm.
winter and spring. And to me, that's what I mean by regenerative for me personally in that, which is again kind of looking for these potential based solutions. And
Mhm.
with regenerative culture, that's exactly what I want to be focusing on. There are a lot of problems, quote unquote, in our society, right?
Right.
Homelessness and these other things. And I think there's actually a lot of potential in these communities that are often seen as problems. There's a lot of potential in the teenagers who are causing problems by having all of this energy. There's a,
Mhm.
the question is how do we activate that potential that's out there? And so that's been my lifelong journey. And again, that's why I really wanted to sign on to work with Brock and Replant the Forest because we're really looking for what the potential in all of these communities that want to
Sure.
be involved are. And
Mhm.
I think that this event is going to be a moment where people are going to have a lived experience of one of these solutions. And I don't think, as you were saying right before the break, this isn't the place where you're going to come and get all of your knowledge and feel like
Right.
you're the perfect
Mhm.
regenerative culturalist or
Mhm.
permaculturalist. But ideally, it's going to be a place where you get a flavor of what
Mhm.
that is and hopefully really ignites your hunger to learn even more from some of these really wonderful experts who are going to be joining us.
Yeah. Yeah. It whets the appetite to do more. But I think it also, if you two could speak to the psycho-spiritual value of trees, because we know, I mean, if you are in an underserved community and all of a sudden you have this incredible amount of green space, you're going to be different. And we are different whenever we're out in nature, just the negative ions alone. I mean, not to mention just that connection, the nature connection. So what would you guys like to say about the value of trees in this regard? Because, once we were animists, and it's very important to remember the spirit of a tree again.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The trees are so important because similar to gardening or any plant work, it
Mhm.
takes you onto the plant timeline, which completely disrupts your busy, fast human timeline. And so, like if anyone who's ever worked a garden, they know the joy of watching this plant grow and evolve and nursing it and seeing it on its timeline in relationship to what you're used to like with interactions and the human space.
Mhm.
Um, I also, and this is me just going on a line, but I think that trees are mystical beings and that they have so much to offer that we don't understand.
Mhm.
And, I have befriended trees
Mhm.
um, really like learned from them. And I think that it's baked into our DNA. We evolved for so long in plant areas.
Mhm.
And now to be born in the middle of a concrete slab with metal and concrete everywhere,
Mhm.
you're missing something crucial that you're wired for. So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, trees are so important for our emotions, for our well-being, and for helping take us on to a different timeline, inviting us into the natural world of which our industrial society is kind of railing against.
Mhm. And the abiotic versus the biotic. Christopher, anything you'd like to add on that
I
topic?
think just to mention a moment that happened for us a month ago when we were doing some site prep work for the festival that's coming up
Right.
is we had maybe 40, 50 volunteers doing a whole day of mixing compost and spreading mulch and doing the seeds. And we had a dance party where we were mashing the seeds into the ground so that hopefully some of them are coming up for us in a couple of weeks
Uh-huh.
here when we come
Uh-huh.
back. And we ended the day actually with a tree planting ceremony. And
Mhm.
so we all circled around this tree that we were planting into the ground. We were all able to put a handful of dirt onto it, and we actually named that tree,
Yeah.
and we sang to that tree as it came in. And so, as Brock was saying, kind of these spiritual creatures, we want to make sure that they're our friends and they're here in communion with us because, again, they're going to be here long after we aren't.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I wonder, speaking about festivals and talking about, some people could live on the peak to peak to peak of festivals, right? Being on the festival circuit, and you're always on the high. But do you feel it is, I mean, people who are involved in restoration work knows that it's not just the stuff of weekend warriorship either. There is the long haul labor of love that, and even within our own gardens, I mean, it's very important for us to be in that long term, just the sacred reciprocity with nature, and that's a daily thing. It's not just a sometime part-time thing. So, how do you two feel that we can encourage people to really be in that as it's just part of our life? It's part of our daily life.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that the number one thing is actually going out and interacting with the land. So I think that person to person, there's a huge spectrum. There's some people who haven't gone out and seen the land a long time or ever, and sometimes that's systematic because they live in a part of the city and they
Mhm,
don't have the transportation to come up to the mountains.
mhm.
And
Or was
sometimes
by design, right? Or
it's
by
by
design. Yeah.
design, yeah, or sometimes it's because we're just too busy. But I think that you keep on talking about kind of the energy that comes with working the earth, Carrie, and I would really agree that like what I experienced going from, loving trees but not really interacting with planting them to getting really into interacting and planting them.
Mm-hmm.
When you put your hands in the soil, the soil grabs back and there's a connection that happens and I could say that when we do these mass actions and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like wow, we did something really special,
Mm-hmm.
strange things will happen to me in nature. I'll have experiences with animals and things like that. So there's this living spirit of the earth that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's about doing your best to remember that and go out and get it. And I think that some people are in a position and more ready to have a more active role in caring
Mm-hmm.
for restoring the land. And
Mm-hmm.
some are at the place in their journey where they're ready to step onto the path and recognize that it's even there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think creating spaces that are inviting and
Mm-hmm.
that bring people into nature
Right.
in a nice and inviting way, in a
Right.
non-traditional way,
Mm-hmm.
the more people that we get onto the path of even recognizing nature is important and
Right.
powerful and
Mm-hmm.
should be tended,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really the best goal.
Well, I think sometimes people do not even know to miss what they don't know that they're missing. And
And
that's because of the rush, rush, rush of the modern lifestyle. Christopher, anything to add for yourself and the um,
Yeah, hopefully through the celebration of what we're doing through this festival, we
mhm,
turn people on to whatever that small thing that they can bring home
mhm,
is, right? And maybe it means it inspires somebody to start collecting compost at home. Maybe it means we inspire someone to be planting some seeds at home. Maybe it means that they get turned on by the mycology workshop or the biochar workshop. And I think that while these festivals can be these kind of like large hedonic peak experiences.
right.
Ideally, we're also giving people these really rooted moments, which allows
Mhm.
them to bring what feels most pure and most accessible for them home.
Hmm. I wonder if you two could speak about, I don't know if you are working with any specific programs around youth. I know you have a focus also for educating, and I'm wondering because it is imperative also for our youth to be steeped in a culture of caring. But that starts when we're young. I mean, not that it only starts then, but that's one of the best times to plant those seeds of caring. So I wonder if you two have, if there's something going on specifically for younger ages, or if there's anything that you're percolating on or dreaming on in that regard.
yeah, I mean, one thing I would say that we're really proud of is that this is a family-friendly festival.
Hmm.
It's not just meant for people who love to dance and stay up late at night, it's meant for everybody. And like you said, caring for the earth and understanding how waste should be handled with recycling and compost, and the ability to plant trees. Like that's something that you can do in your life. We want to be educating our youth in that. So that's part of our community's fabric,
Mm-hmm.
is inviting the whole family along and making it a fun and a safe place for
Mm-hmm.
everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And we definitely would like to be doing more programs that help bring youth out into nature, and that really help support youth also taking part in making art, whether that's
Mm-hmm.
performance art or visual or music, and having those spaces intertwine. And it really just goes back to finding the right supporters to help us lift the programming that we're dreaming of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it seems that really what the Replant the Forest is really restoring this village-minded consciousness and just organically happening, especially when you bring families there, you're touching the earth together. It's pretty much everything that we actually need is just the arts, music, the togetherness, good food, because you guys have, I don't know if it's always like a potluck situation like what we had at the kind of preliminary event for this festival, but what is the food situation for the multi-day?
Yeah, so for the multi-day, we're gonna have a really delicious food truck called Indulgia, which has got a
Mhm.
bunch of vegetarian eats that are gonna be getting served. And we're also providing a large vegetarian meal after the planting to weave everyone in to celebrate that we just did this great planting.
Mhm.
And there will be a potluck component of it. It is a festival, so we are encouraging people to come with their camping gear and prepared to help lift each other up. But that's what the food's like in this one. And the last one we called Dig and Dance, which was all about soil restoration. We had all the compost delivered and did that great event. And yeah, these are the things that weave community, great music, great food, great conversation, and a shared activity.
Mhm.
We did an olive picking activity one time, or we've done different things, because what we've noticed is that if you get people together and
Yeah.
give them something productive to do with their hands,
Mhm.
they talk and they connect.
Yeah.
And we're also in an era where connection, I think, is a real premium and is something that's
Mhm.
more special than ever.
Mhm.
And it's not just connect to the earth, it's connect to each other,
Sure.
because that's what the earth needs too, for us to put our minds together.
Well, I wanted to mention that Joanna Macy has been on the show, and one of the things she had shared is that it's imperative to feel the grief and heartbreak of our times in order to love and care for the world. And I wonder what you two would like to say about, we talked about peak to peak on festivals, but that there is also a piece of being able to address the heartbreak because you don't also want to deny that it's heartbreaking to see the way we um, in short order, have devastated the world in just a matter of hundreds of years when indigenous peoples have lived here for millennia, since, time immemorial and cared for the earth. So there is a heartbreak in that. I think there is a need to address what has been our responsibility in the past, what is our responsibility now. How would you two like to speak to the grief and heartbreak of our times and what role that has to play for us now in restoration?
Yeah, I think that that term eco grief is
Mm.
becoming more and more. I mean, I hate to say popular, but
Mhm.
it's even something you can get trained in now. And
Mm.
I do hear what you're saying, and I think that for anyone who wants to get on with this work, at some point, that grief is going to come up. And I think that's actually why the art and the music and the community are such essential pieces of this,
Right.
because there's cultural and creative catharsis that can happen through that. And
Mhm.
so through the music and some of the music which is directly speaking to these environmental issues, through the
Mhm.
sculptures, through the late night conversations around the fire, I think
Right.
one of the things that we're trying to create is a container for people to be
Mhm.
able to feel whatever it is that comes up.
Mhm.
And again,
Mhm.
on the property we're going to be on in a couple of weeks, it is fire devastated. And
Mhm.
so you can see and feel that while you're there. And that's one of the great conundrums of how you can be in great beauty and in great loss at the
Mhm.
same time.
And you
Mm.
can hold those two instead of pushing one or the other away. They're really intertwined. It's all part of the spectrum of life and death. We can't just deny one part of it and just live in one half of it and that just be in life. It's nature doesn't do that, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I would just love to say one thing also about Joanna Macy, because, I was reading one of her books, and
Mhm.
something that really stuck out to me was the phrase sustaining the gaze, and talking
Mm,
about, even though it hurts, to not look away from it, but to
mm,
sustain the gaze that, like, there's this destruction happening across the planet, and, you know, it needs us to be here and to rise and
right.
meet it and feel what we feel and turn that into action. And so I think that that's really important from her teachings that I resonate with. And the other thing I'll say is that some of the greatest music in the world is made from really deep pain. Some of the
Hmm.
greatest art that's ever existed is made from
Right.
tremendous sorrow and pain.
Hmm.
And so, we need to activate all of the hurt into what we're doing also. And it's not about just looking away and having fun and numbing out or running away from it. I mean, sometimes you have to just use it to run forward. And like Christopher said, we're really trying to make a container for to hold it all, for whatever you need to feel on this journey forward, not backwards.
Mm-hmm. It's wonderful. Thank you too so much, and to all the staffers, all the rest of the board, John Allen, all the people involved with Replant the Forest Festival. It is a remarkable opportunity to engage in all of the things you've talked about, the arts, music, as well as truly becoming, participating in the great work of our times, as John Liu would say, which
Yeah.
is to heal and restore not just the earth, but ourselves, and to share this planet. And so it's really our kuleana, as my kumuhula would say. Would you two share about how people can be in contact with you? How can they learn more about the upcoming event in Santa Paula on April 25th, the 27th? Please share some of your links. Where
Yeah,
can you find you?
absolutely. Absolutely. So we would love for everyone to come and join us and get involved with what we're doing. You can find us on the internet at replanttheforest.org, and on Instagram we're at Replant the Forest. And those are really the best places. From there you can get all the information on any event that we're doing, because we will continue to do events in this nature. And yeah, and reach out on our email there, and we would love to connect.
More power to you both. Thank you so much, Brock and Christopher, for your vision, for your heart, for just following your heart's calling in planting these trees and engaging community around this, because we know this is the work of our life right now.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah. Thank you too. Looking forward. April 25th,
Let's
27th.
do it.
Yeah.
Thank you to our guests, Brock Pollock and Christopher Breedlove, and thank you to our listeners for joining us. This has been Replant the Forest Festival, merging art, music, and restoration. For an extended version of this interview, become a member of our Patreon or visit our website at ecojusticeradio.org. Please connect with us on social media at EcoJustice Radio, SoCal350, and Wilder Utopia. If you like what you've heard and you want others to be informed, subscribe and share the episodes. Project of SoCal 350. The show can be found on all major podcast apps and at ecojusticeradio.org. Executive producer, myself, Jack Ite, co-host Carrie Kim, and engineer and original music by Blake Quake Beats. And until next time, remember, the power is yours.